Hey guys, Pete. This is social media class, chapter 12. This will be the last one of the semester. I thank you for, in advance for all your hard work throughout the semester. Um, online classes can be tricky sometimes, and, I appreciate the ability to be able to interact face to face, and, that's missing in this class, and it adds additional challenges. But I hope you've gotten something out of the text, and the class has been a benefit to you in some way. You guys rocked it with questions again for Chapter 12. There's a lot of good stuff to cover here, so I'm just going to start going through stuff. Again, I apologize that it doesn't look pretty or exciting, but that's not my thing. But um, you guys asked some great questions that led me to think about things, and we'll get through them as quick as we can. The first thing from Elena, mandatory classes for elementary and high school students stuck out to me. I taught a media literacy class this semester, and just last week we had the students go into to Seward Elementary for the K through 4 classes, and each, so I split the class into 5 groups, and they each took a grade. One had kindergarten, one had first grade, etc. And their goal was to go during their library time and teach a media literacy lesson that might have to do with advertising, like better understanding the goals of advertisers, or online safety, or whatever it might be. And they do some what they call digital citizenship stuff in the elementary schools already, with like, hey, be careful what you put online, and create strong passwords. And here's how you know if you're a first grader, if this is a good website or not, that kind of stuff. But there really isn't a comprehensive, or mandatory, like you say, classes in media literacy in many states. It's simply a state or regional or a city level decision or school level decision. If this stuff, there's no like required comprehensive media literacy education that needs to take place at K through 12 in the United States, which to me is insane, because people are using more and more media at younger and younger ages, right? And we're not balancing that out with just basic media literacy training of like, social media ethics, like you mentioned, or using, being safe while using social media. I mean, there is some of that stuff, but there's no comprehensive requirement throughout the nation to cover that in schools, which to me is antiquated. And then Elena's second question is kind of a little bit more philosophical, but democracy is vitally dependent on good people to be actively engaged in the process. When I got my doctorate from the University of North Dakota, a lot of times people would ask like, who hadn't, caught up with me for years, what'd you get your PhD in? And I would say in communication. But technically the name of the degree I got was communication and public discourse. And the idea of that is that being trained in communication, you are also being trained in how to enter the public sphere and to discuss issues. Instead of being a bystander, like you said, we step in and we weigh in on social issues. As Christians, right, you're called to do this. And, we're called to, to interject ourselves in the right ways in certain situations. But absolutely, I think democracy is strengthened by people who weigh in on social issues, right? Democracy is strengthened by people who play the role of devil's advocate, who play the role of agitator, who test the status quo. Which is why, I posted a few weeks back about the protests that were going on in Missouri. And a lot of people have like negative reactions towards these, towards various protests, especially if they're going above and beyond what, you would see as being necessary. But at another level, we would not get to where we were socially as a nation if it weren't for protests, for people standing up when they believe something is wrong. We're a country that used to have slavery, right? we're a country that has changed many processes over time because people have stood up for saying, "Hey, this is wrong." And yeah, I think you should stand up for what you believe in. Obviously, doing so in a moral and ethical and appropriate way. Um, and it doesn't have to turn into an internet flame war, right? You can one of the best lessons you can learn in life is how to discuss things rationally with people you disagree with, and to still maintain relationships with people who you have strong social disagreements with, and that's okay. It's okay to have different perspectives and realize where they're coming from, and still finding strength in your own beliefs. So yeah, I liked when you brought that up. Tegan brought up the stuff about the University of Kansas professor, um, and they asked what kind of rules are put in place for athletes regarding social media and what they can and can't post. And then someone down here, I believe Hannah, does Concordia have a policy towards social media use for its professors? Like the Kansas situation. In terms of Division I athletes, I honestly don't know if they have to sign like anything when they participate in Division I sports about social media use. My guess is that would be no, and that instead it would be monitored by a team-to-team basis. It's an interesting situation where, based on free speech laws, there would be very little an institution could be able to do. Like, they can't do anything legally about what someone might say on social media because of free speech, but they hold other things over that athlete that would allow them to interject if an athlete or or even a professor, same idea at Concordia, was posting something that was inappropriate, or that the institution didn't like, whether it's making them run at practice or not playing them in the game. I don't know. I assume they could do that sort of stuff. I assume the student most often would receive a strong warning from higher up saying, "Hey, you can't be posting this stuff. You need to clean it up. You need to stop." And 99% of the time, that athlete's probably going to say okay, and that's going to be the end of the situation. But if it was pushed further, it technically could create some very hazy legal issues based on free speech laws. At Concordia, when I signed a contract here, this is my first semester here. I honestly can't remember. I don't think there is an official, we were encouraged to use social media to promote Concordia in a positive way. That's part of, the review process, is they want us posting on Twitter and Facebook and being active in the community and telling people what's going on at Concordia and all that. In terms of what I could post or not post on social media, I'm not 100% sure. I know that in my classes, for instance, if I were to be arguing a viewpoint that was contrary to LCMS belief, I would be allowed to do that, but I would need to also give the LCMS point of view on the situation. So, not that this would ever happen, ever, but if I was going off about, I don't know, some issue that is counter to LCMS belief, I would need to present the LCMS belief and say, this is one perspective, I have one perspective, you can decide what you want to decide. So there are rules in place in terms of how we can teach in classes, but I'm not sure about personal social media use. It creates some hazy gray areas, right? You can see how that would be. If I posted something on Twitter that Concordia didn't like, could I be fired, even though I have a signed contract? These are things that come up at institutions around the country. I mentioned it, earlier on in the year in one of these videos, that there was a case that I believe will reach the Supreme Court next year that has to do with a high school student being suspended for off-campus, non-education related, inappropriate Twitter posts. And the question is, can schools regulate student behavior off campus and suspend them because of what they said outside of school on social media? It creates some interesting gray areas. Seth talks about, is social media really free? If you've taken my media literacy class, we talked about how nothing in media is ever free if there's advertisements there. And you might say, hey, I see the advertisements, I don't pay for them. But, you pay for it with your time, and you pay for it in ways you don't immediately understand, based on brand recognition being influenced by the advertisements that you see. So, like, I was on Twitter last year, and at the time I was unhappy with, my razors I was using to shave with, and an advertisement for Harry's razors came up. And for whatever reason, because of, being unhappy with my razors, it caught my eye. I clicked on it. I didn't buy anything then. I didn't buy anything right away. I didn't immediately see that and go out and buy a bunch of razors. But, 3-4 months later, when it got around to the, a different part of the year, and when I was buying razors, that was still in the back of my mind, and that's what I bought, right? And there's other instances of that, I'm sure, for you too, where it doesn't immediately impact your purchasing, but it does. So it does cost something in a way. It's just not as direct as like a subscription cost, or an immediate payment. One thing I wanted to clarify, Jacob talks about the Colbert Report and people telling the facts and everything. We do need to distinguish between information literacy, which seems to be what you're talking about, like finding facts on things and being able to find accurate information quickly, and media literacy. Media literacy is more along the lines of being able to evaluate and critique and create and access media effectively. So, people who are highly media literate are less likely to be manipulated by an advertisement, because they realize, hey, this is what the advertisers are trying to do. They see it on a little bit of a deeper level. So media literacy is different than information literacy. Bree kind of talks about what school is going to look like in 10 years when many of you guys have kids. Again, going back to this media and information literacy being taught in the classrooms. And all I can say is that I believe it's slowly moving in that way, in that direction. And schools are realizing that to stay ahead of the curve, they kind of need to cover this stuff. But, it's interesting that something so fundamental to the lives of so many, young people, which is technology, receive so little education in the schools in terms, beyond just very basic, like your computer classes and your library classes. There's very little in terms of evaluating messages. And I'm biased, I'm a communication professor, but, yeah, that's how I see it. Colin talked about the Justine Sacco tweet, and I just wanted to mention briefly too. I did, he says something she probably regrets. I did read an article that was 1 year later about her. That was pretty interesting, and I just wanted to give her side of the story, which was basically, she said it was not a racist joke. The joke was meant to be, if anything, satirical towards, white culture. That we get to live in a safe bubble, not worried about the horrible atrocities that take place around the world. We get to live forgetting just how difficult some people's lives are. So when she said, hey, I'm not gonna be, whatever the quote was, I'm not gonna be getting AIDS because I'm white, that kind of thing. Her argument, and you can take it or leave it, agree with it or not, was that she was actually being satirical towards the dominant hegemony there, which has the viewpoint of nothing, privileged white society. I don't know, you can believe that or not, but I just wanted to give her perspective there, so we have another position on it. Last thing, Ethan, how can we expect low-income and third-world individuals to catch up on social media literacy? I mean, this is a major problem. This is called, you'll hear it called basically like the knowledge gap. And it's only increasing. I mean, seriously, the difference between the haves and the have-nots in not just in third world, but I mean, we're talking in the United States, between high and low income, the disparity in terms of information and media literacy is growing every year. And there's becoming a larger and larger divide because technology spurs on that. You can accomplish so much so quickly with technology that if you're not along for the ride, you're falling so far behind. Yeah, and I 100% agree. It's important for life, and it's also vital for education. I mean, we can't teach the same way we did 20 to 30 years ago, right? You have to change and adapt with the times. And I think this knowledge gap is becoming a bigger and bigger problem. Great questions. We do have your final test coming up, which I hope to get posted sometime in the next 24 hours. And other than that, let me know if you have any questions or comments or feedback, and have a good one. Thanks.